Good morning. My name is Sarah Rodriguez, and today I would like to share with you the findings from my research survey for COM 540. So before we look at the actual findings of those survey questions, I want to provide you with a little bit of an overview, and then we'll proceed from there. Oops. So before I actually sent out my survey questions, I started with the gatekeeper interview. My gatekeeper was Debbie Allman. She's the vice president of education of a local Toastmasters club. Full disclosure, it's also a club that I belong to and that I'm a member of. But I think as a qualitative researcher, that has just given me more of a bird's eye view of the communication issue that has arisen. So based on my initial interview with her, we were really more just looking at email in terms of a workflow issue. But after having a conversation with Dr. D, it easily became apparent that I needed to pull back and broaden the lens so that I was really focusing on more of a broader communication issue, which led to a second interview with Debbie, which we started talking about, okay, well, what is it about this that is the communication aspect? And it's that there's a delay or a complete lack of response in the emails that she sends out to club members regarding signing them up for meeting roles or signing them up for speeches. The second part of that conversation focused on the hybrid meetings that we have. So we meet once a week as a club. It's always a hybrid meeting. That means if you're virtual, you have the option of attending via Zoom, or you can actually just walk into a conference room and attend in person. There's definitely a discrepancy in the experience of being in the room with other members of Toastmasters, getting up to give speeches, fulfilling your meeting roles versus you're a virtual attendee and you're logging on from home or the office. Toastmasters itself is a nonprofit organization, and its intent is to help business professionals increase their public speaking options, their skills, and along with that is an improvement in leadership skills. So I think that's definitely a great foundation for an improvement in communication overall. But because we talked about email and because we talked about hybrid meetings, suddenly this light bulb went off, and I realized that that overarching issue is one of how are we communicating within a digital space or a digital realm. So that is where I decided to focus my research, and I tried to incorporate that into the survey question. So let's look at those findings. The survey itself was 12 questions. I wound up sending it not only to the 20 members in my club, but 3 other clubs. And they're all local. They're all here in Bakersfield, California. So that was a total of 81 Toastmasters that it was sent to. And there were 12 responses. The first 2 questions in the survey quickly established that there is not a concern as far as technology. Everyone has access to the same technology. I also wanted to focus on, are you comfortable being signed up for a meeting role in advance? I have to be careful here because I know that some of this is organizational culture versus a communication issue. But if a Toastmaster is uncomfortable being signed up for a role in advance, that may be part of the underlying issue as far as why they're not responding to emails effectively or efficiently as they could be. So responses for this, over 60%, well over 60%, said that they either strongly agree or agree that they're comfortable. So again, it's not an issue of that they're not comfortable with that. They're just not responding for some other reason, or they're delaying their response. My next question's focused on, are you logging on to the club's website? Because in addition to the email response, they can also just go onto the website. So I thought, well, maybe they prefer to do that instead of emailing back. But it doesn't sound like that is really the issue here. And then I also asked, what is your comfort level in using the editable weekly meeting agenda? And it seems to be there's a pretty high comfort level. And I asked, how do you prefer to sign up for a meeting role? And the majority of them were okay with clicking on confirm in the email. 25% still like to go onto the website to confirm their role. And 8.3% like to volunteer in person. So that kind of goes back to, is there a personal preference versus that they really, do they understand that their lack of response or the delay in response is not a good way to convey, that communication digitally. And then I asked, how do you prefer to sign up for a speech? So do you like to volunteer in person? 41.7% said they want to volunteer for those speeches in person. So again, there's a little bit of a disconnect in, what can we communicate digitally? What is appropriate to communicate digitally? Or are we constantly being pulled by this traditional organizational culture that says, this is the way we've always done things, and so this is the way we want to continue doing things? Then the survey changed focus to concentrate on hybrid meetings. I asked, how often do you attend hybrid Toastmasters meetings as a virtual attendee? Over 30% said every week. 25% said once or twice a month. So there's a significant number of Toastmasters that are choosing to attend virtually. So there's still really a need here. Those hybrid meetings are not going to go away. 25% said they've never attended. In my mind, if I've never attended a hybrid meeting as a virtual attendee, then I have no real concept of what that experience is like. And so if I'm on the other end of it, if I'm in person in a conference room, maybe that is partly why I'm not focused or aware of those virtual attendees. They're getting neglected, they're getting ignored. And then I asked, if you've ever attended a hybrid Toastmasters meeting as a virtual attendee, how would you rate your overall experience? Well, 33.3% still said satisfactory, 8.3% said very satisfactory, 8.3% said neutral, and 50% said not applicable. So we're kind of all over the place. Although the majority said satisfactory, I mean, not the majority, but a large chunk. If 50% are saying not applicable, that's very likely because they've either never attended or because maybe they just don't want to say how they felt the experience went. Have you ever given a speech as a virtual attendee for a hybrid Toastmasters meeting? 58.3% said no. If you have, how would you rate your experience giving a speech as a virtual attendee? 58.3% said not applicable because maybe they never have. 16.7% said they thought it was very satisfactory, which is great. 8.3% said unsatisfactory. It's not easy. It's a different experience to give a speech virtually, obviously, but what can be improved in terms of communication so that it's a better experience for everybody, regardless of if you're a virtual attendee or if you're right there in the conference room with everybody else face to face. And then I asked about, if you've never attended a Toastmasters meeting as a virtual attendee, would you like to? Would you like to be able to have that as an option in the future? 83.3% said yes. This is not going away. Future trainings, I asked, if a Toastmasters training was offered during an upcoming meeting, what topics would you be most interested in learning more about? I was really trying to get an idea of, of all of these issues, what can we train on? What could become a training and development module? And 4 people responded, hybrid meetings. And I titled it, Finding a Balance Between In-Person and Virtual Attendees. Now, 3% still wanted to have further training on how to access and navigate our club's website. That's information I can field to the officers of the club. That's not what I'm going to focus on in terms of communication training, but I thought that was interesting. Okay, so overall, communication issues, email, delay in response, lack of response. I admittedly struggled to grasp or address that in the survey questions, but it is still, based on my interviews with Debbie, it is still very much a communication issue. And then hybrid meetings. What is the experience for everyone, regardless of if you're virtual or in person? Is there a lack of awareness or maybe even interest in the virtual attendees? And then, we have these tools. Zoom was created and it's meant to be interactive. And there are ways moving forward with a training and development module that we can work on that with those meeting attendees. Conclusions. I talked about this already, but it's really important to piece out organizational culture, personal preference, and then what I'm going to refer to as digital body language. So what communication acts are we actually part of in that digital space? What are we saying? What are we not saying? What are we saying by not saying anything? So those are some of the conclusions that I wanted to focus on. So very briefly, digital body language is a term that has become popular. An author, Erica Dewan, she wrote a book in 2021 called Digital Body Language. And it's basically defined as traditional body language and its connections to communication, but as it's transformed by the digital world. So when we look at cues and signals, we know that nonverbal communication is important. Obviously, academic literature highly disputes how important that is, depending on what journal you read or what expert you're listening to. But we do know that communication, regardless of if it's in person, face-to-face, or in a digital space, it needs to be effective and clear. So whether we're emailing, we're texting, chatting, or we're communicating over video conference, are we doing that effectively? When we look at email and text and chat, digital body language also looks at what punctuation are you using? Do you use emojis? And what is the timing or in this case, lack of response in those ways that we communicate? And then we really want to look at our video conferencing practices. What ways can we improve that experience for all people, all communicators? Digital body language is meant to improve trust and connection. It's very much in that interpersonal communication realm. And to do that, you have to have an awareness and an intentionality. And I know that both of those things can be taught. Thank you for listening to my presentation. Obviously, there is more information to follow regarding digital body language, as well as that supporting academic literature in my problem essay. But that is all I have for you right now. Thank you.